I thought leaving the church would ruin my life, that I'd lose my purpose, my peace, and my place in the world. But what I lost in comfort, I gained in clarity. And what I walked away from was nothing compared to what I walked into. Because as it turns out, the life I was taught to fear was the life that I actually needed to live. Leaving religion didn't leave me empty. It left me open. Open to truth, to healing, to building a life based on integrity instead of fear and freedom instead of control. But let me be clear. This isn't a story of instant peace or overnight transformation. It's a story of a long overdue wrestling, of breaking, of becoming, of realizing that everything I thought would destroy me actually saved me. In this video, I'm sharing 10 powerful truths I learned after leaving the church. Truths that religion never prepared me for, but that life revealed when I had the courage to step outside the lines. If you're deconstructing, doubting, or just trying to make sense of your journey, I want you to know that you're not alone and you're not lost. You're evolving. So whether you're still in the pews or already on the path out, this is for you. Because the road away from religion isn't a fall from grace. It's a rise into freedom. Let's get into it. Here are the 10 things I learned after leaving the church. Doubt isn't dangerous. It's liberating. Doubting your beliefs doesn't mean you've lost your way. It means you've begun reclaiming your ability to think critically, authentically, and independently. Doubt isn't a threat. It's an invitation into a deeper, more honest exploration of who you truly are and what you genuinely believe. Religion often teaches us to fear doubt. We're told that uncertainty is a sign of spiritual weakness or a dangerous step toward losing everything we believed in. But what if the opposite were true? What if doubt is actually the healthiest step toward genuine growth and interest? For many, the first brush with doubt is unsettling. The ground beneath you seems unstable because the certainty religion once provided starts to crumble. Yet, it's in this very moment, this frightening yet courageous place, that true freedom begins. It's not the end, it's the beginning of intellectual autonomy, emotional authenticity, and real personal agency and growth. I remember one of the first times doubt truly gripped me. I was preparing to preach, wrestling quietly in my study with contradictions and questions that I could no longer ignore. My heart raced and I could feel the weight of every sermon I'd ever given pressing down on me. At that moment, doubt felt like betrayal, like I was failing myself, my community, even my God. But then something shifted. Instead of pushing those thoughts away, I sat with them. I allowed myself to ask questions I'd always feared asking. What if I'm wrong? What if the answers I've accepted aren't actually true? And most importantly, why am I afraid of these questions? Gradually, something incredible happened. Doubt didn't destroy me. It empowered me. It gave me permission to look honestly at what I believed and why. Rather than losing myself, I began finding a deeper sense of authenticity and self-awareness. For the first time, I was living from a place of genuine curiosity rather than scripted certainty. Doubt doesn't weaken you. It strengthens your capacity for critical thought, empathy, and personal authenticity. It's a necessary and courageous step toward discovering a life defined by integrity rather than imposed beliefs. What doubts have you feared exploring? And why? How could embracing your questions lead to greater authenticity in your own life? Community exists beyond the walls of the church. Real community doesn't require conformity. It thrives on genuine connection, authentic belonging, and unconditional support. When you step outside the traditional boundaries of religious institutions, you discover that community isn't limited by shared beliefs. It's enriched by shared humanity. Church communities often pride themselves on unity, but too often that unity demands conformity. It subtly requires you to suppress parts of yourself to belong. But genuine belonging never demands the denial of your truth. It invites you to show up fully, exactly as you are, differences and all. Leaving church can feel like losing everything: friends, relationships, identity. But it's also a chance to discover deeper connections built on authenticity rather than uniformity. Outside the walls of religious communities, you'll find a vast spectrum of people who celebrate rather than fear diversity and difference. When I first left church, one of my greatest fears was losing my community. I worried I'd be isolated, completely alone. Initially, there was a painful sense of loss as friendships built on shared beliefs began to fade. But in time, I started seeking out connections beyond my previous comfort zones. I discovered vibrant secular communities, diverse groups centered around common interests like social justice, art, philosophy, and humanist activism. These communities didn't ask me to hide my doubts or downplay my questions. Instead, they celebrated curiosity and welcomed authentic conversations. I remember attending my first secular meetup, nervous yet hopeful. And to my surprise, no one asked what I believe as a prerequisite for connection. Instead, we discussed real life, struggles, aspirations, hopes, and fears without filters of judgment. I realized this was what I'd always wanted community to feel like: safe, real, supportive, fully accepting. Community isn't found in agreeing on everything. It's discovered in the willingness to connect genuinely with each other despite our differences. Real community embraces diversity as a strength, fostering deep connections through authentic interactions, mutual respect, and unconditional support. Have you ever felt pressure to conform in a community to be accepted? How did that affect your sense of self? And what would it look like to find or build a community centered around authentic connection rather than conformity? Morality doesn't belong to religion. Ethical living and morality are not owned by any religion or religious doctrine. Goodness, empathy, compassion, and integrity exist independently of faith, revealing that morality is a human trait, not a religious one. One of the greatest myths we're taught is that morality belongs exclusively to religion, that without religious rules, we'd lose our moral compass entirely. But morality isn't something religion invented. It's something religion attempts to codify, control, and claim ownership of. When you step outside religious frameworks, you quickly discover something powerful. Your moral intuition doesn't vanish. It actually clarifies and often deepens. Free from religious pressures to perform morality for divine approval, you begin to live ethically from genuine empathy, compassion, and personal integrity, not because you're afraid of punishment, but because you genuinely care about the people and the world around you. This is perhaps one of the most liberating realizations, that being good isn't about following a set of rules dictated from above. It's about aligning your actions with your deepest human values, cultivated through empathy, reflection, and reason. Leaving the church initially left me grappling with a significant fear. Without religious rules, would I lose my sense of right and wrong? I'd been told repeatedly that without God, I'd have no moral compass. At first, I anxiously watched my every move, expecting to feel adrift or tempted toward reckless decisions. But something entirely different happened. Without the constant threat of judgment, reward, or punishment, my actions became clearer. My reasons for helping, giving, and caring became deeply genuine. I discovered my morality wasn't something handed down by doctrines. It was rooted in something far deeper: my humanity. I started volunteering, not out of religious obligation, but from genuine compassion. My relationships improved, not because I feared divine displeasure, but because I was motivated by empathy and authentic connection. Instead of weakening, my ethical core became stronger, clearer, and undeniably mine. Morality doesn't vanish when you step outside religion, it deepens. Ethical living flows naturally from genuine empathy, compassion, and critical thinking. When morality comes from within rather than being imposed from outside, it becomes richer, more authentic, and more deeply human. Have you experienced fear around losing your morality outside of religion? What happened when you faced that fear? How does knowing that morality is innate and human rather than religiously mandated empower you to live more authentically? Healing happens when you're honest about your hurt. True healing begins the moment you become honest about your pain, especially the hurt caused by religious experiences. Too often, religious communities replace genuine emotional healing with spiritual cliches, inadvertently suppressing real trauma beneath layers of spiritual language. Religious culture frequently encourages us to mask emotional pain behind phrases like, just pray about it, or let go and let God, or it's all part of his plan. While intended to comfort, these cliches often leave wounds untreated, buried beneath spiritual jargon rather than genuinely healed. This superficial comfort can create deep emotional repression, where real hurt and trauma linger beneath the surface. Healing demands honesty. It requires you step beyond spiritual platitudes and directly confront the pain you've experienced, pain that might have been dismissed, minimized, or even shamed by your religious community. When you finally allow yourself the freedom to admit your wounds without guilt or shame, genuine healing can begin. True emotional recovery comes not through suppression, but through courageous acknowledgement, vulnerability, and self-compassion. For years, I carried silent wounds from experiences within church. Hurtful interactions, harsh teachings, and moments of spiritual manipulation were often brushed aside by well-meaning mentors with comforting but shallow advice. Give it to God, or have faith, or just trust. Initially, I believed that addressing my hurt directly meant I was weak or faithless. I internalized shame, believing my pain was evidence of my spiritual immaturity. But beneath the surface, those wounds didn't vanish, they festered. After leaving the church, I finally gave myself permission to acknowledge my pain openly. I spoke honestly about experiences I'd once minimized. I named the trauma that I had buried for years beneath spiritual rhetoric. It was painful and it was raw, but it was undeniably freeing. The moment I stopped hiding behind spiritual cliches was the moment true healing began. I discovered genuine emotional freedom, not through spiritual suppression, but through honest vulnerability, personal reflection, and compassionate understanding of myself. Healing doesn't come through ignoring or spiritualizing your pain. It comes when you courageously name it, confront it, and validate it. Real healing is rooted in honesty, vulnerability, and self-compassion. Have spiritual cliches ever prevented you from fully addressing your emotional pain? What would it look like for you to speak honestly about your hurt without shame or guilt? Meaning is something you make, not something you find. Religion often teaches that meaning is something to be found, handed to you by a divine source, written into your life like a hidden script. But leaving religion reveals a powerful truth. Meaning isn't imposed from above. It's crafted intentionally, courageously, and personally by you. When you grow up in religious spaces, the idea of purpose is typically prepackaged. You're told that God has a plan, that your job is to discover and obey it, and that meaning comes from surrendering to something already written. That can feel comforting until it isn't. Because if your purpose is given, not chosen, then questioning it becomes rebellion. If your meaning is fixed, then evolving feels like failure. But what if there's no divine plan waiting to be discovered? What if life isn't a test, but a canvas? Leaving religion often removes the old answers, but in doing so, it opens up possibility. It invites you to design your life rather than decode it. Purpose is no longer about meeting divine expectations. It's about aligning your actions with your values, your passions, and your vision for the world. Meaning stops being something you stumble upon and starts being something you build. When I left the church, I feared I'd feel aimless, adrift, without a calling. For years, I'd believed my worth came from being used by God, and my purpose was to fulfill a role He had designed. Without that, who was Darante? But over time, something remarkable happened. I realized I didn't lose my purpose. I reclaimed it. I began asking, what do I value? What kind of world do I want to help create? What brings me alive, stretches me, and allows me to serve others on my terms? Instead of waiting for meaning to arrive from the sky, I started shaping it with my own hands. Every choice, every relationship, every project became a brushstroke on the canvas of a meaningful life. And here's the wild part. It felt more sacred, more alive, more real than anything I'd experienced when I thought I was just following God's plan. Purpose isn't something you were born to discover. It's something you were born to build. You don't need permission. You don't need a divine blueprint. You need clarity, courage, and a little bit of creativity. You are the author of your meaning. Whose definition of purpose have you been living by? And is it truly yours? If no one gave you a script, what kind of life would you create from scratch? Fear of hell robs you of real life. Living under the constant threat of hell doesn't make you moral. It makes you anxious, repressed, and afraid to be fully human. The fear of eternal punishment doesn't protect your soul. It steals your life. Hell is one of the most powerful psychological tools religion has ever created. It teaches you that questioning, exploring, or even feeling too much might land you in eternal torment. You're warned that loving the wrong person, thinking the wrong thoughts, or straying from the approved path, even for a moment, could cost you everything. This fear doesn't just affect your afterlife beliefs. It reshapes how you live your actual life. It causes you to shrink, to second guess, to censor yourself constantly. You say no to dreams, you suppress desires, you monitor your every move, not because you're seeking truth, but because you're trying to avoid punishment. But fear is a poor foundation for a full, free, meaningful life. When you break free from the fear of hell, it doesn't make you reckless, it makes you present. It allows you to engage with life not as a test, but as a gift, not as something to survive, but as something to savor, shape, and share. For most of my life, the fear of hell was in the background of everything I did. I wouldn't have admitted it outright. I had the language of grace, salvation, and love, but underneath it all, there was always a trembling. What if I'm wrong? That fear made me cautious with my curiosity, guarded in my relationships, and constantly self-policing. I didn't realize how much it was stealing from me until I started to let go of it. And when I finally stopped believing in hell, it was like a weight I didn't even know I was carrying dropped off my chest. I could breathe, I could feel, I could live. Suddenly, I wasn't loving people out of obligation. I was loving them because I wanted to. Wasn't serving others because I feared judgment. I was showing up because compassion mattered to me. Losing the fear of hell didn't make me a worse person. It made me a better one, kinder, more grounded, more honest. It reconnected me to the richness of life I'd been too afraid to fully taste. Hell is a story designed to control people, not to liberate them. When you stop living under its shadow, you don't fall, you rise, my friend. You gain access to a fuller, more vibrant existence rooted in love, not fear. Has fear of eternal punishment ever stopped you from fully embracing your life or desires? What might shift in your relationships, passions, or self-image if you no longer believed in hell? Your identity isn't found in your beliefs. You are not the sum of your beliefs. Identity isn't a checklist of doctrines. It's a living, breathing expression of who you are becoming. When you leave religion, you don't lose yourself. You begin discovering the self that was buried beneath the labels. Religious spaces often equate belief with identity. You're not just someone who believes in God, you're a believer, a Christian, a child of God, a vessel, a servant, a worshiper. Your entire sense of self becomes wrapped in these roles. And for a while, it can feel comforting. Belief gives you a place, a name, a story. But what happens when that belief shifts? When the stories stop making sense? You're taught that doubt or departure isn't just disagreement, it's identity loss, it's erasure. But that's the lie, because your beliefs may change, and they should as you grow, evolve, and experience life. But your humanity, your values, your essence, your you-ness was never confined to what you believe. Identity is bigger than belief. It's multifaceted. It's fluid. It's yours to shape. When I left religion, one of the most disorienting questions I faced was, if I'm not a Christian anymore, then who am I? So much of my identity had been tied to religious titles: pastor, worship leader, man of God. I wasn't just believing something, I was something because I believed it, or so I thought. After leaving, I felt like I had no name, no map, no tribe, but slowly, painfully even, beautifully, I began rebuilding, not with borrowed labels, but with honest reflection. I asked the important questions. What do I value when no one's watching? Who am I when I'm not performing for approval? What kind of person do I want to be on my terms? And the truth is, I didn't lose my identity. I finally found it. I realized I'm not defined by what I used to believe. I'm defined by how I choose to live, love, grow, and show up in the world today. My identity became richer, more complex, more me, because it wasn't handed to me. I built it. You are not your belief system. You are a whole person with depths, contradictions, beauty, and change. Letting go of religion isn't losing yourself. It's letting your true self rise to the surface. What religious roles or labels have shaped your identity, and do they still serve you? If you could redefine who you are without any imposed beliefs, who would you become? Spirituality and superstition aren't necessarily the same thing. You don't have to believe in magic, miracles, or a divine plan to experience awe, connection, or transcendence. Spirituality isn't the same as superstition, and letting go of supernatural beliefs doesn't mean losing your sense of wonder. It means reclaiming it and grounding it in a reality of beneficial utility. Religious environments often monopolize the language of spirituality. You're told that without God, there's no meaning. Without faith, there's no transcendence. So when you walk away from religion, you may feel like you're also walking away from mystery, beauty, or sacredness. But that's just not true. Superstition is the belief that unseen forces control your fate, often demanding rituals, rules, or obedience to avoid punishment or earn blessings. It's rooted in fear and fueled by the unknown. Spirituality, on the other hand, is something far more human. It's the capacity to feel deeply, to be moved by art or music, to be humbled by the cosmos, to sit in silence with another person and feel something real pass between you. Secular spirituality isn't about pretending to know the unknowable. It's about being present to the reality that is. It's about leaning into the moment, the mystery, the meaning we make when we live intentionally, compassionately, and with curiosity. You don't need superstition to feel connected. You need honesty, openness, and wonder. As a secular humanist, I've come to understand that spirituality isn't about escaping this world. It's about fully inhabiting it, feeling the weight of grief and the height of joy, being aware of our brief, brilliant existence and choosing to make it matter. My most spiritual moments now happen in silence, not in prayer, but in presence. Watching my children laugh, holding space for someone's pain, staring up at the night sky, not needing to explain it, just letting it humble me, creating meaning through art, relationships, and shared purpose. These moments aren't supernatural, they're fully natural, and yet they feel special and sacred, not because they're divine, but because they're real. And that's what makes them powerful. Not superstition, but sincerity, not belief in the unseen, but reverence for what is seen and felt. You don't need religion to experience something sacred. You don't need superstition to feel connected. Secular spirituality can be about living fully, feeling deeply, and creating meaning from the only thing we know for sure we have, this life right here. What moments in your life have felt truly spiritual, even outside of religion? And what might a spirituality rooted in honesty, awe, and shared humanity look like for you now? Not all authority is worth trusting. Religious authority often demands obedience without question, framing doubt as rebellion and skepticism as sin. But learning to think critically about authority isn't dangerous. It's absolutely necessary. True maturity begins when you realize that not everyone who speaks with power speaks with truth. In many religious environments, questioning authority is painted as a moral failure. You're taught that pastors, prophets, or spiritual leaders are God's voice, and to challenge them is to challenge God himself. This conditioning makes it easy for harmful ideas and harmful people to go unchecked. But blind trust isn't faith, it's vulnerability without boundaries. Leaving religion often means learning, sometimes painfully, that charisma isn't character and title isn't truth. It means realizing that discernment is a survival skill, not a spiritual flaw. And it's not just religious leaders. This lesson extends to politics, workplaces, and even personal relationships. All power deserves scrutiny. All authority must earn its trust. Healthy skepticism is not cynicism. It's wisdom forged in the fires of experience. One of the most liberating shifts in my journey was learning to ask hard questions without guilt. I stopped assuming that just because someone was in a position of power or claimed divine endorsement that they were automatically right. I started evaluating, what are they asking me to believe? Who benefits if I obey without question? Are they inviting curiosity or demanding conformity? Do they welcome accountability or avoid it at all costs? This shift didn't just protect me from manipulation, it sharpened my mind. I became more thoughtful, more discerning, and more grounded in truth that made sense, not just truth I was told to accept. It also helped me forgive myself. I wasn't foolish for trusting people who claimed to speak for God. I was conditioned not to question them. But now I know better. And that's the beginning of real empowerment. Authority should be earned, not assumed. Questioning power is not rebellion, it's responsibility. The moment you stop blindly obeying is the moment you start truly thinking, and that's where freedom begins. Were you ever discouraged from questioning authority in your religious upbringing? What impact did it have on your ability to trust yourself? What does healthy skepticism look like in your life now, and how can it protect your freedom and growth? Freedom is worth the cost. Leaving religion often comes at a cost. Relationships may change, comfort may vanish, certainty may dissolve, but what you gain in return is priceless. The freedom to live as your fullest, truest self. And that freedom, it's worth everything. No one talks enough about what it costs to walk away. It's not just doctrine you leave behind, it's your identity, your community, sometimes even your family. The grief is real. The silence can be deafening. The fear of starting over without the map you've always used can feel paralyzing. But freedom always had a price, and authenticity is rarely easy. Still, with every step you take toward truth, you shed layers that were never really yours. You start breathing deeper. You start choosing for yourself, not out of guilt, not out of fear, but from clarity, from conviction, from you. That kind of freedom doesn't make life easier. It makes it realer, more grounded, more alive. I won't lie. Leaving the church cost me things I didn't expect. I lost friends I thought were family. I lost the certainty of always knowing the right answer. I lost the script that told me how to be good, how to be blessed, how to belong. But I gained something far more valuable. My voice, my mind, my life. I stopped performing and started becoming. I stopped living for approval and started building a life that felt like mine. The freedom to ask, to doubt, to grow, to stumble, to rebuild on my own terms has been the most powerful, painful, and beautiful gift of my life. And if you're somewhere on the same road, struggling with the cost, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not weak for walking away. You are brave. You are powerful, and you're now free. Freedom isn't the absence of pain. It's the presence of truth. It may cost you comfort, but it gives you yourself. And that is a trade worth making. What have you lost on this journey, and what have you found that made the loss worth it? What does freedom look like for you now, and how are you learning to live in it more fully each day? Leaving the church isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new one that you get to write. Yes, it takes courage to walk away from certainty, to question what you were taught, to let go of the comfort of black and white answers in exchange for a world full of nuance, complexity, and truth. But what you gain is worth it. You gain your mind, you gain your voice, you gain a life that's not built on fear or obligation, but on authenticity, integrity, and choice. You don't need religion to have values. You don't need a pastor to have purpose, and you don't need permission to grow, evolve, or change. You are not broken for leaving. You are becoming. So here's my question to you. What have you discovered about yourself now that you're free to explore who you really are? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And if you're looking for community that doesn't require conformity, where you can keep asking, healing, growing, and building, you're already invited. Join us in the Bridge City community on Sundays, or our Darante LaMar Discord, or right here by subscribing, because you're not alone. And the world needs people who've had the courage to not only deconstruct, but also reconstruct. We've had enough destroyers. It's time for the rise of developers. Now, if you enjoyed today's conversation, check out the videos on the screen to see just how deep this rabbit hole goes. Welcome to Wonderland. Thank you for hanging out with me today, and until next time, keep rising.